Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Today is Thursday, June 18th, 2020. Thanks so much for joining me. It was reported that last night, about 50% of the Atlanta Police Department refused to come into work, or they called out sick. And they did this in response to the prosecuting attorney in Atlanta bringing charges against the officer who shot Rayshard Brooks. We didn't get a chance to cover that yesterday because it happened. The charges being brought down happened late afternoon yesterday after the show was published. And in response, the police officers are saying, well, if we can't be free to shoot black people without having charges pressed against us, then we just won't come to work at all. Fostering and fomenting a bit of fear amongst people who are still underneath the delusion that the reason their communities are safe is because of police officers. That's the furthest thing from the truth. Police officers don't keep your community safe. They never have. They never will. They respond to crime. And if they respond at all, they come too late. They never get there in time to stop a crime from happening. And in fact, they're not the people who solve the crimes. Detectives solve crimes, not the people that come out in the cop cars, not the officers, not the street cops. And so they are trying to demonstrate that their labor is important enough for us to be like, wow, they're on a strike. We should be concerned. When most of the people across America really are like, no, please don't stop. Don't strike. They're defunding themselves, showing us that they are not necessary, that they are an exorbitant cost on the cities across this country. Down in Atlanta, the cost for police officers is about the same percentage as you see across every city. The biggest line item in every single city's budget is policing. Robert Reich, former labor secretary, tweeted out last night that the United States of America spends about $315 million every single, wait for it, not year, not month, not week, but $315 million on policing every single day. Our priorities have been wrong in this country for so long. We have been held hostage by a police state that is a quote unquote protection racket, but they don't even provide you protection. They provide you the illusion of protection. Do you feel safer after you got robbed to see the police officers show up and try to take a couple of notes and interrogate you and then inadvertently start shooting people in your house, shoot your dog? How many times have police officers shown up to a scene and caused more chaos than they do good? And then how many times do police officers, the cops that are patrolling the streets, actually solve a damn thing? Detectives solve the crimes, the few crimes that are solved. So, somebody tweeted yesterday, and I think it's apropos, like, for you to have a successful labor strike, your labor has to be valuable. And nobody sees the labor of cops as valuable except people who are still under the delusion that the reason your community is safe is because police officers are there. No. In fact, if your community becomes less safe because police officers are no longer patrolling it, it's probably because the police officers are on strike and they're angry and they're trying to make a point. They're trying to foster crime. They're trying to make sure that you are free. It's a game that is as old as time. The protection racket is something that has been going on in every empire. It's just sanctioned now. It's sanitized and it's sanctioned, and it is the biggest line item in the budgets of every single city. They operate like a mafia. They operate with a code of silence where you will not find people who are actively working in police agencies turning over the quote unquote bad cops. They won't do that because they know if they are the honest actor, honest broker in that precinct, that nobody is going to trust them. And so in response, like, and here's the other thing, like down in Atlanta, they are pretending. No, not pretending. They are deadly serious about the fact that if they are held accountable for wrongful. I'm sorry, I got to take a pause. Let me go a step back. I didn't get to cover this. A lot happened yesterday. But as the evidence started coming out from the prosecutors in the case against Garrett Rolfe, that's the officer that shot and killed 27-year-old Rashard Brooks. In the evidence that was presented yesterday afternoon by the prosecutors, they have evidence that two things occurred after the shooting. Three things that are significantly important. One, Garrett Rolfe kicked. After shooting Rashard Brooks in the back twice, he kicked him and said, "I got him." They showed an image of this man doing a power kick. A powerful kick, like a curb stomp styled kick. He yelled, "I got him." The second thing was the second officer involved, stood on Rashard Brooks' shoulders after he was already shot on the ground. And the third thing that was very significant is that they waited 2 minutes to call the shooting in. 2 entire minutes to call the shooting in, which means it was 2 minutes too late. Rashard Brooks could not get any CPR and anything to help him whatsoever because they waited 2 entire minutes. And in reaction to this evidence, right, these are things that most of us who understood that this was a problem, that the shooting was a problem in the first place, we did not know these things. The prosecutor in the case brought those things out, and that's why they charged him with felony murder. And it was reported yesterday that the second officer involved decided to testify against Garrett Rolfe, the one who pulled the trigger. So he was going to snitch. He was going to turn state's evidence against his own partner. Now, that seems to be in question at this point because it seems as though the second officer is backtracking and saying perhaps he won't testify against his partner. And does not that sound like someone who wants to do the right thing, someone who wants to save his own ass, quite frankly, and do the right thing, but now he's terrified of doing it because, well, let's just say he's feeling a little bit of pressure from his colleagues in the police mafia. You can't be a cop and turn state's evidence and actually think you'll get away with it. So all this new evidence came out, and instead of the fine officers down in Atlanta stating that they were disappointed in their fellow officer, or even if they didn't want to say that, they could say, well, let's see what the evidence says. Instead of saying anything like that, despite the evidence that Garrett Rolfe kicked this man while he was down after shooting him twice in the back, kicked him and yelled, "I got him." And then stood on his shoulders. The partner stood on his shoulders and then called 2 minutes after. Despite all that evidence, the police down in Atlanta are saying that they don't want to work anymore. Well, fine. No one's going to stop you because, as I believe, and the evidence when New York police officers came up with the blue flu and they all struck. Then, like, for a week, crime went down. That's because you don't have police officers arresting people for petty instances, for petty things in order to meet their quotas. And the only people to me, the only people who are really pushing this narrative that police officers are what keeps us safe are people who really aren't the ones living in the neighborhoods that you see the police officers in. I've seen a handful of so-called journalists who are pushing this narrative that, oh, well, we really do need the police. The police don't patrol your neighborhood. You make enough money not to have police patrolling in your neighborhood. And so you are doing the bidding of the ruling elite, whether you want to admit it or not. You are doing the bidding of the ruling elite by protecting this police state. The police state is here to protect the powerful and the rich, not the people that they patrol. They are protecting the powerful and the elite of this country from the people they patrol. We saw that for 2 weeks on display straight. Every night, police officers were cracking the skulls. Literally, there's reports after reports of the damage that police officers did to people. And you have people with cracked skulls. You have people with broken bones. You have people who have been blinded. You have people who have died from the chemicals that they were exposed to in the tear gas. The police agencies across this country are going to defund themselves because they're going to have a lot of lawsuits to pay out for. And so it is not the cops. Let's dispense with that. Let's dispel that notion right now. Your community is not safe because police officers are there. Your community is safe because your community has enough resources to not have people commit crimes of desperation, crimes of opportunity, or crimes of survival. That's why your community is safe. And instead of us spending $315 million every single day on police agencies across this country, we can invest those funds into the communities so that every community can have a baseline of needs met. And if everyone has a baseline of needs met, then you won't have you'll still have crime for sure, but you won't have crimes of desperation. You won't have crimes of survival. You won't have crimes of opportunity where people feel like the only opportunity out of their neighborhood is a particular type of crime. You will still have plenty of crime, particularly down on Wall Street, the people that are never prosecuted, the people who are never arrested, the people who are never accosted, the people who rob us the most, the people who do the most looting in this country. There will still be plenty of crimes for you to go and focus on that community versus the black community and all of the poor and impoverished communities across this country. So to the officers down in Atlanta that don't want to go to work, please don't. We need you. Don't stop. You're hurting our feelings. Whatever. Yep. Other information on Garrett Rolfe, the officer who shot and killed Rayshard Brooks in 2015. The Guardian is reporting that he was involved in the shooting of a black man, and court documents show that police officers did not report the incident. So he was involved in a cover-up of a 2015 shooting. I mean, we always bring in the past of every victim. We always discuss the criminal past of every single victim. We sure as hell are going to discuss the criminal behavior of police officers. But it gets even worse, or better, depending on if you want to say it ironically. It gets even better. The officer who killed Rayshard Brooks just completed a de-escalation training on April 24th of this year. And he completed deadly force training on January 9th of this year. So spare me all this noise about cops needing more training. Training to do what? Not kill black people? Because as we've said before, and we're going to say again, if you need training to not kill somebody, then you don't need a gun in the first place. What it is that whenever, and we discuss this is the problem with the Democratic Party. Their answer, as well as the Republican Party, but the Democratic Party always tries to offer reforms. And when you offer reforms to police agencies, that usually translates into more money for those police agencies. And so a small percentage of that goes into quote unquote training, but we see more goes into them buying tanks. I mean, just really think about it. Why would you continuously give an organization that already takes up the majority of your budget, but commits the most murders in your city, continue to give them more money, to continue to strengthen them, to strengthen their unions? This is a racket. The police forces across this country are a protection racket that don't provide you with protection. They provide you with the illusion of safety. And if you ever try to hold them accountable, they act like children, like babies, like spoiled little brats who can't get their way because they can't be free to shoot black people with impunity. That's what we're dealing with. And the mayors across this country need to hold the line against the mafia that is controlling their cities. But I mean, that would suggest that the mayors of our country have a backbone and a spine. But instead, they regularly capitulate to the strong-armed manipulations and fear-mongering of the police. And let me just remind you again of that data point. Every single day in this country, million is spent on the police forces across this country. Imagine what $315 million a day could do for the well-being and the welfare of every single impoverished person in these cities. If you look at we arrest poor people. We don't arrest rich people. We barely touch the middle class. We arrest impoverished people, and there is a direct correlation between crime and poverty. But there's also a direct correlation between the ease of actually arresting, number one, and then prosecuting, number two, and getting a guilty verdict when that person is poor and impoverished. We are using the police state in this country to abuse and criminalize poverty. And we spend an obscene amount of money on that system every single day. Whereas we could address the poverty by spending money to help alleviate the poverty, we instead use that money, that $315 million every single day, to imprison and to criminalize poverty. We have morons in our temples. We have disingenuous, manipulative, but really not even that good at their manipulation, bad faith actors who are in our temples. I want you to listen to this exchange between Representative Cedric Richmond, who is a Democrat from the second district of Louisiana, and Matt Gaetz, who is the Republican from the 1st District of Florida. The first voice you're going to hear is that of Cedric Richmond, and he's making the case of why he wants today, or yesterday when this occurred, he wanted that day to be solely focused on the imminent threat that black people face at the hands of the police. And Matt Gaetz did his best to what-about his way right out of that debate.
I'm not interested in studying Antifa. I'm not even interested in studying the Klan or sovereign citizens right now, because that is not the imminent threat that black men face on a daily basis. And right now, too often, it is law enforcement, those who were sworn to protect and to serve. And so all we're asking today is to deal with that. And I will give you the benefit of the doubt that it is an unconscious bias that I'm hearing, because at worst it's conscious bias. And that I would hate to assume from any of the people on the other side.
Will the gentleman yield?
Sure.
I appreciate your passion. Are you suggesting that you're certain that none of us have non-white children? Because you reflected on your black son and you said none of us could understand.
Matt, stop. I'm not about to get sidetracked about the color of our children. We're talking about black kids. I reclaimed my time.
You said that.
I reclaimed my time. I know.
You want the discussion?
I know that
The gentleman reclaimed his time.
I already know that there are people on the other side that have black grandchildren. It is not about the color of your kids. It is about black males, black people in the streets that are getting killed. And if one of them happens to be your kid, I'm concerned about him too. And clearly I'm more concerned about him than you are. So let's be clear about that.
You're claiming you're more concerned for my family than I do?
The
Who in the hell do you
gentleman,
think you are?
gentleman,
If the shoe fits.
You don't know how much we care about our families.
Kick dog holler.
You should take those words down. I know
gentleman
you care
will
about your family and love your family.
The gentleman will suspend. The gentleman will suspend. The time belongs to the gentleman from Louisiana.
Cedric, would you yield?
Was that a nerve?
Yeah. Was that a nerve? I'm sorry. I had to play that the majority of that entire exchange. The disingenuousness level is obscene. Now, it was all for naught. It was all for show because they passed the bill. And mind you, the bill that they passed, this is the thing. This is what I want to point out most of all. This is the most important thing. Matt Gaetz there is grandstanding in a very kind of pitiful way. It's not even the best use of manipulations and whataboutisms and bad faith arguments. It was really just a bunch of shouting about the fact that maybe he has black kids. Well, no matter if you have black kids, you should be concerned about this too, but you're not. So that would mean that Cedric Richmonds is more concerned about your kids than you are. But I digress. The point is this, is that this is the reaction of the Republicans in the House of Representatives to the mild and very milquetoast reforms that were offered by the Democratic Party. I covered it last week. They want to ban the chokehold, et cetera, et cetera. That's like the biggest thing in there is to ban the chokehold, which New York City banned back in 1993. But here we are, the Democratic Party, the best they could do with this legislation is to do this. And this is how the Republicans react to it. This is how they also wanted to get rid of qualified immunity, which is actually a good thing. I mean, getting rid of qualified immunity is actually the thing because that is what insulates, that is what protects Republicans. Cops are generally Republicans. But qualified immunity is what protects cops from having any civil and oftentimes criminal liabilities. But this is still, at the end of the day, nobody is defunding. The Democrats they're actually proposing giving more money for training. As I discussed before, that's always a Democrat solution. Let's pour more money into the police and let them get more training. They're going to be the most trained killers out on the streets. But that's not good enough. And because it's not good enough, because it is not a full capitulation to the right-wing authoritarian ideology of the state of the police state, Republicans are acting as though it is some egregious attack on the police. And Matt Gaetz is using a really kind of pathetic attempt at whataboutisms to and actually not even whataboutisms in this case, but really red herrings to derail the debate in hopes of derailing the entire legislation. And this is why you cannot try to be reasonable with unreasonable people. The Republican Party, the protectors of this police state, the ones who don't want anything to change at all. If anything change, they want police to have more authority and less accountability. They are looking at this mild milquetoast legislation from Democrats and acting as if it is an all-out war on the police. Well, we can't count on either party defunding them, but we can count on police defunding themselves because they're starting to quit all around the country and showing us ultimately how utterly useless their services are for so many people. This is breaking news, or at least at the time that I'm recording. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled today that the Trump administration cannot carry out its plan to shut down the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, which has allowed nearly 800,000 young people known as Dreamers to avoid deportation and remain in the United States. I am reading from NBC News. Chief Justice John Roberts was the swing vote in the 5-4 decision, which deals a big legal defeat to President Donald Trump on the issue of immigration, a major focus of his domestic agenda. Roberts wrote in the decision that the government failed to give an adequate justification for ending the federal program. The administration could try to shut it down by offering a more detailed explanation for its actions, but the White House might not want to end such a popular program in the heat of a presidential campaign. We've gotten quite a few surprise victories so far in this. Every June, the Supreme Court hands down their decisions that they have been considering, usually since October, if I'm not mistaken. And so far this week, there's been a victory on LGBTQ rights. There was the victory today for DACA. I believe there's a third one, but it escapes me right now. But Donald Trump is not too happy with it. And this is what he said via Twitter. He said, quote, "These horrible and politically charged decisions coming out of the Supreme Court are a shotgun blast into the face of people that are proud to call themselves Republicans or conservatives. We need more justices or we will lose our Second Amendment and everything else. Vote Trump 2020. Okay. If you say so. I mean, you got Gorsuch on there. And in this case, Gorsuch did rule with DACA. Right, ruled against DACA. So your two appointees did rule against, they ruled in the way that you wanted them to. John Roberts, who was a George W. Bush appointee, I remember that hearing clear as day. I was in, not that this is relevant at all, but I had a speaking engagement, and they had me in the raggediest hotel I had ever been in my life. I mean, it was so horrible. I was like, damn, I need to have, you always got to have enough money to put yourself up in a hotel. But I was really young. Like that was back like 2005 or something like that. So I didn't have any money. I had to stay in that raggedy hotel, but I digress. That's why I remember those hearings so well, because it was my escape. But it was a George W. Bush appointee, John Roberts, the Chief Justice. And to be quite frank with you, it seems as though John Roberts is ruling in a far less ideological fashion than you would expect. And this is something I had a discussion. There was an AMA that I attended online on a Discord server. And this was one of the questions that I enjoyed the most, was about, the assumption that these quote unquote big bad conservatives are going to get rid of anything liberal and progressive. And here we are seeing that you have Gorsuch on one decision and John Roberts on two or possibly three decisions that actually are moving the country forward progressively. I mean, the answer to the question really is the same that I talk about on this show all the time. It's not about your political ideology. It's about whether or not you are going to engage in good faith. Because if you're going to engage in good faith, that means you're going to win some. That means you're going to lose some. But if you're being honest about what's going on, if you're being honest about it, then that's what matters more than anything else. You're not our enemy because we have different ideologies. Our real enemies are people who refuse to engage in good faith, bad faith actors, not ideology. That's our enemy.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and get twice the content and unfiltered interviews without any of the commercial interruptions.
And here we go. At this point in every single episode, I'd like to take a minute to thank the people who make this show possible, our patrons. Very special welcome to Ryan Aaron. Thank you for becoming a patron. Emily Bryan, thank you for becoming a patron. Brandon Williams, thank you for becoming a patron. Rashawn Denning, thank you for becoming a patron. TJJ, thank you for becoming a patron. Everybody just bop, yo. Adam Schroeder, thank you for becoming a patron. Eben Philbin, Mike Schnee, Nathaniel Kent, Dustin Peters, CT Apolliner, I can't pronounce it, CTA, thank you for becoming a patron. Mabitso S, thank you for becoming a patron. Andrew R, thank you for becoming a patron. Jason Peckles, thank you for becoming a patron. And last but not least, a very special welcome to Chris Hagan. Thank you for becoming a patron. You too can become a part of this prestigious and prodigious patron family who give me the ability to speak truth to power, whether the powerful like it or not, by going to patreon.com/The BPD Show, where you get twice the content, uncut, unfiltered interviews, and none of the commercial interruptions like you get right here.
Welcome back to The Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at thebenjamindixonshow.com.
All right. Welcome back. Okay. Last but not least for the public show, remember you can get twice the show by going to patreon.com. The show always continues after the closing music for our patrons. It's just my way of saying thank you for supporting the show. Also, Friday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we are having a patron party in Zoom. We can get up to 500 patrons, I believe, in there. And so if we get 25, it's going to be a party. If it's just me and you and the DJ, we're going to party all night long. But on a very serious note, before I close out the public show, we have to continue to take the coronavirus seriously. Across the country, there has been a significant uptick in the number of cases and the number of deaths. There was new data that came out that shows that young black people are 9 times as likely to die from the coronavirus than white people of their same age group. And young Latinx individuals are more likely to die 5 to 8 times more likely to die than white people of the same age group. And of course, white people are dying of this as well. This is a very serious pandemic. And we've had a revolution. And again, I call it a minor revolution, not to diminish what took place, but in actuality to let you know how significant what happened, right? It wasn't just a series of protests. It was a minor revolution, and we can change some things because of the sacrifices that you all made. And it kind of reduced the fear and the focus that we had on COVID-19. But I think we need to put our focus back on it. I think we need to make sure that we're taking all the precautions that we were taking before, that if you can still shelter in place, please do. If you can work from home, please do. If you can encourage your employee to let you work from home, please try it. If you are an essential worker and you have to be on the front line, like I told the patrons yesterday, be as selfish as you possibly can with your safety. Don't apologize. Don't apologize for taking care of yourself. Don't think twice about putting your health before your job. Let me repeat that. If you are an essential worker, I know you already know this, but sometimes it's good to hear from somebody else. If you are an essential worker, you are putting your life on the line for your job and for the people that you serve. Don't think twice about putting your health first. And I want to say that because I know sometimes people, all it takes is a momentary lapse of conscious thinking about protecting yourself that could cause this thing to spread. And sometimes when you are a kind person, you put yourself second. You put your well-being second. And I'm just encouraging you, if nobody else has told you to put yourself and your health and your safety first, Benjamin Dixon is telling you to put your health first. That's my time. Patrons, stay tuned. Everyone else, thank you for being a beautiful audience.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.